there at Rebel High to work at the local rodeo arena and help bust broncs when he left town to travel the circuit because his choices had been too few and far between, and living on the edge had paid the most money. He hadn't listened to her, not until he'd come home 6 years later for his youngest brother's funeral. A brother who'd stayed the course, graduated at the top of his class, gone off to college, and then straight into the Marines. Travis had never run from anything difficult. He'd worked hard to make their parents proud, to make something of himself, to live up to the prestigious Sawyer name. It isn't too late to step up and do the right thing, Mimi had told him as she'd sat next to him in that first church pew, the smell of gardenias from the casket spray nearly suffocating him. You can do this, Hunter. You can turn it around and be a steady hand just like Travis. She'd been right. Hunter had traded in his living on the edge mentality and wandering ways, and now he was here, about to run for his third term as sheriff of Rebel County. People had been skeptical at first, and he'd barely won the first race, but thanks to his Mimi and the fact that he'd been running against a low-life Tucker, folks had seen him as the lesser of two evils and given him a chance. Number 2 had been a landslide, and 3 was sure to be the same, especially since his opponent was none other than Cade Tucker. While Cade was one of the few Tuckers to rise up and amass a small fortune for himself, most of the local businesses had Sawyer roots. The Sawyers were the money behind Rebel. They always had been, and to hear his Mimi tell it, they always would be. Even against Cade, Hunter would most certainly win, if he could shut down the moonshine ring that was still operating in his county. That would easily top Cade's one and only claim to fame, blowing the whistle on 2 local nail salons that had been fronting football pots. This was much bigger and sure to trump Naughty Nails and their little side business. That's why Hunter was out here risking his neck. No way did he like the sliver of apprehension that whispered up his spine, or the rush of adrenaline that pumped through his veins and coiled his muscles tight. This was just part of the job, one that he would soon hand over to the suits out of Austin. The FBI had been breathing down his neck about the case, thirsty for details, hungry for a major caller, which he would gladly give them, once he had more information. Hardcore evidence. It was all about being thorough. No way was he out here after hours because this was the most interesting case to come across his desk since he'd discovered Buddy Roy selling marijuana brownies out of the trunk of his Kia. Sure, Hunter dealt with the occasional moonshiners, but most were local and harmless. They posed more of a threat to themselves than they did to the good citizens of Rebel. But these guys, they were different. They might well be local, but they were smart, too. Cunning. And judging from the covert setup, they were most certainly moving more than a few jars of moonshine down at the VFW hall. These shiners were going to great lengths to cover their tracks and protect their investment, which told him it was a hefty investment indeed. That, and he just had a feeling. That tingle that told him there was something big going on, something dangerous, exciting. The thought struck, and he pushed it away. He wasn't looking for excitement. This was all about keeping the peace in his town, being reliable, dependable. He wouldn't disappoint. Those days were long gone, buried 6 feet under with his little brother who'd always gone above and beyond the call of duty. Yep, he would gather as much information as possible, and then he would hand it over to the feds. Then he would get himself over to the courthouse and file the paperwork to run for another term. But first, he eyed the small red dot blinking on a nearby tree. His gaze focused, taking in the edges and curves of the game camera attached to the sturdy wood. Another quick glance at the rest of the area, and he noted another camera, and another. Yep, these shiners were smart, all right. So smart that he wouldn't doubt that the cameras not only took pictures, but also sent live feed to someone on the other end, watching for trespassers, waiting. He moved ever so slightly, and the light on the nearest tree blinked. The faintest hint of a flash lit up the area and sent